Back when I was a teenager in Scouts, I vividly remember weekends away in the wilderness where my buddies and I would be dropped off at some isolated location in the middle of nowhere. Our Scoutmaster would specify the coordinates of a destination point and give us 3 days to get there. And of course, this was long before Google Maps or GPS, and we had to engage in old-fashioned orienteering and find our way through the wilderness guided with nothing more than a compass and the contours of a map. Now, one of orienteering's most important lessons was drummed into us from day one. In order to counteract the difference or the variation between magnetic and true north, we learned to place our compass on the map with the heading arrow aligned with true north and rotate the compass housing until it lined up with the magnetic north line. Once our map and our compass were calibrated, we were then ready to embark on our journey. Now, in training, we had heard stories, countless stories of groups that had gotten hopelessly lost because they had failed to do this. Now, presuming the difference between the two norths was insignificantly small, some scouts figured they could just work it out as they went along. However, the diversion of a few degrees compounded over many hours or days of walking typically led them miles off course. Now, it is much the same in principle for any organisation or any individual today. Without clear values to guide conduct and culture, it is easy to lose our way, to lose sight of the things that really count, and subsequently lose the trust of those who matter most, our customers. The power of having a clear set of values and guiding principles in organisations is that they help clarify things like the attitudes that you will accept, the priorities that you give precedence to. What about, the behaviour that you esteem? In his book Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business, Gino Wickman points out that one of the key benefits in having clearly articulated values is that you tend to attract team members who share those values, who then become a powerful and self-fulfilling loop within an organisation. Conversely, codifying your values also reveals the attitudes that in your organisation or your context are unacceptable, the things that are not a priority for you. What about the behaviours that you discourage or prohibit? These things are as important. In a powerful example of values in action, consider the offensive scene that unfolded on a Delta Airways flight in November 2016. As one particular passenger was boarding flight DL 5371 from Atlanta to Allentown, he strode down the aisle, clapping his hands above his head, shouting, "Donald Trump, baby, have we got some Hillary BITCHESs on here?" And on the tirade went. Can you just, imagine how offensive that scene was. Now, the video of this scene captured on a fellow passenger's phone quickly went viral on Facebook and prompted an immediate response from Delta's CEO, a guy named Ed Bastian. Citing Delta's value of dignity and respect for passengers and employees, Bastian refunded the tickets of every passenger on the flight and placed a ban on the offending passenger ever travelling on a Delta service ever again. Now, going even further, Bastian apologised that the staff hadn't immediately removed the passenger from the flight, and here's what he said at the time. He said, "After questioning the customer, our team members made the best decision they could given the information that they had, and they allowed him to stay on the flight." He said, "However, if our colleagues had witnessed firsthand what was shown in the video, there is no question they would have removed him from the aircraft." He said, "It is important that the airline admits its mistakes when one is made." Now, that is the sort of values-led integrity and honesty that wins the trust of customers. A dangerous dynamic unfolds when an organisation's stated values don't match the reality. There's something leaders must work hard to discern. Some brands and leaders choose to ignore incongruence, while others are simply unaware of it. I remember a few years ago spending the day doing some strategic planning work with the leadership team of a sizable optometry practice. In the early stages of the program, right at the beginning of the day, I spent some time clarifying the business's values. Now, as is so often the case, words like integrity and honesty and customer service were listed as the core principles that guided this business. Now, during the afternoon, our attention turned to some of the disruptive threats that were facing their business and the industry at large. One of the most significant disruptions they identified was the increasing number of patients or customers who were going online to purchase contact lenses. In many cases, customers had been loyal to the optometry practice for years. Now, as we started to brainstorm how to combat this threat, one of the business's key leaders raised her hand and said that they'd been trialling a tactic in recent months that seemed foolproof. Now, I was intrigued and I asked what it was. And she said this, she said, well, when customers ask for their contact lens prescription so they can go online to have it filled, we simply send to them, a prescription with a few of the key measurements removed. And she said, without those measurements, they have to come back into the store. Now, I was stunned at what I was hearing. Even more startling was the fact that this otherwise intelligent and savvy business professional didn't recognize the incongruence of what she had just shared. It was directly at odds with the very values she and her team had agreed were core to the business just a few hours earlier. Now, the reality is that organizations and brands that compromise their core values in the pursuit of profits, growth, or relevance are unlikely to last the distance. And as the old saying goes, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Now, the challenge is that compromising our values is often not something we consciously do. Now, during a 2013 investigation into bullying and harassment in the Australian military, Lieutenant General David Morrison offered a profound insight. He said this, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." Now, while Morrison's words were directed at his fellow military leaders, they hold true for any organisation or individual. Now, the moment we catch ourselves accepting behaviour, attitudes or choices that fail to align with an organisation's stated values, we actually endorse them. In order to earn and keep the trust of the market, it is critical that an organisation's practices, policies and processes are aligned to non-negotiable principles. After all, the moment we compromise on our values, the seeds of distrust are irrevocably sown. And innovation without integrity will always end badly. And it really does take courage to hold fast to commitments that may prove costly in the short term. So, in your case, what are your non-negotiables? What are you unwilling to walk past or accept in your context, your organisation? It's important to be clear that operating with values may be fashionable, but it's often costly. The old axiom is so true. A principle is not a principle until it costs you something. That said, while the financial costs of living by your values may be high, the return on investment in terms of earning the trust, affinity and esteem of the market is difficult to put a price on. In the words of Alan K. Simpson, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters.